Hey everyone, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. Hope you've been doing well out there. So in today's video, I wanted to share with you a bit of a reframe or a bit of a thought experiment around depression. So if you're someone who deals with depression, this might be interesting or useful for you. So let's get into it. Okay, and just a quick caveat here. So yes, I'm batch recording a bunch of videos today and I'm underslept. So my brain is a little slow. My cognition is not as sharp as my optimal ideal kind of way of being, which means of course that I might kind of ramble on a little bit more, stumbling upon my words to try to find what it is I'm trying to say as I unpack this information here. So if you're someone who needs real clear, tightly paced, concise content because it's irritating to listen to someone think on the fly, this probably isn't going to be the video for you, but this is also an incredibly important video. So fair warning, heads up, do with that what you will. And enough said, let's go ahead and get into the main content here about depression. Okay, so real quick thought experiment here that I want to just offer you guys for anyone out there who may be, occasionally dealing with depression or kind of chronically or have really kind of treatment resistant depression. I wanted to just give you another angle on thinking about this that might be potentially useful. So one of the common issues that I deal with as a coach when someone comes to me and they're like, I want to work on my depression. I've got a lot, I'm really depressed. I've got a lot of depression issues here. One of the issues that immediately comes up, as that becomes the piece that they want to work on, is just the idea, the concept, the framing of depression, right? As this kind of big, heavy, untouchable, kind of monolithic experience that is pervasive and that literally frames things in terms of depressed. Right? Just the word itself, depression, has a certain connotation, a certain kind of meaning and feeling to it, right? Of heaviness, of weightiness. And while that might feel kind of emotionally accurate or kind of metaphorically true, I want to just offer you this thing to try out because I've found that it clarifies the understanding of depression so much more. And a lot of my clients end up being really grateful for this frame, this lens to look at it through. So here's the thought experiment. Throw out the word depression to describe what it is that you're experiencing altogether. Just throw it out and try on other language to describe it. So, one exercise sometimes I'll do with people is I'll have them try to just describe what they're experiencing in their day-to-day experience that they would have called depression. But if we're throwing out that word, if that word's off the table, how would they describe it to me? What's happening? And, at first they're kind of annoyed. They're like, yeah, it's chronic sadness and I'm lack of motivation and anhedonia and I'm tired and I'm blah, 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 right? They'll kind of, rattle off the standard list of symptoms. But if I press them to kind of unpack that a little bit further, right? Well, how exactly does that happen? Where do you feel that in your body? What does that look like in terms of the shape of the timing of your day, et cetera, et cetera? We start to really describe what's actually fucking happening in the person's life. And we start to get a very different understanding and picture of what's happening than if they just say, I have depression, right? So that's the first kind of suggestion. Another flavor of this, though, would be to consider that instead of depression, what it is some form of numbness, freeze response, or dissociation. That I don't have depression, I have dissociation. And then the question becomes, of course, dissociated from what, right? And usually what I find, and my kind of belief about depression is that often what it is, if we think of dissociation as this experience of disconnect, as an experience of distance from something, right? I'm dissociated, right? If I'm dissociated from my body, I'm disconnected from my body. If I'm dissociated from my thoughts, I'm disconnected from what's happening in my head. If I'm et cetera, right? So if I think of it as not that I'm depressed, but that I have some form of dissociation, then the question is, what is it I feel this kind of distance and this dissociation from? And it might be something that mattered to me. It might be a person. It might be a relationship. It might be a type of experience. It might be something I used to value, but it got so painful to value that I had to stop caring about it. But now I have this pain of feeling distant from the thing that used to bring me a lot of joy and aliveness, right? Start to look at, again, depression as a disconnect. What is it that I'm disconnected from? And that might be kind of conscious. That might be something I kind of know, where it's like, yeah, I can see maybe I'm disconnected from my family, or just disconnected from people, or disconnected from a sense of safety, or disconnected from a sense of, motivation and passion, right? It might be something like that you could kind of describe or know, or it might be more unconscious. It's just that this felt sense. I feel disconnected. I don't know what from, but I know I can feel this disconnect, right? And if you just stop to think about it for a moment, if we look at the descriptions of what dissociation is in the kind of more extreme clinical sense. I realize I just did a recent video about dissociation, how it's not always bad, and how there's actually therapeutic uses for dissociation, and it's kind of a capacity of the nervous system. But if we're talking like clinical kind of trauma response style dissociation, where we're really like, numbed out, spaced out, avoidant of a trigger of a whole trauma as part of a trauma response, right? If you really look at that, people will describe it as, numb, heavy, things lose their excitement, kind of just floating along in life, feeling disconnected, feeling distant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we can see that there's a big overlap here between, if they're not the same thing, they're at least very much overlapped between depression, quote unquote, and dissociation, right? So the last thing I'll say here, I realize I'm kind of riffing and rambling, as is kind of my intention here with this video. Last thing I'll say to you is this. I want you to understand that the central core thing that creates healing in us is the experience of connection. And I've said this over and over and over, and I know I'll be saying it ad nauseum in future videos, because it's just fundamentally true. And people are so often confused about, how do I heal myself? And the answer is going to be some form of, there is something I need connection with. Maybe a part of myself, maybe some emotions I don't want to feel, maybe a situational connection to people in my life, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. It could be different for each one of us, and there could be multiple pieces that we need connection with in order to really feel that healing. But it's some form of connection, right? And so this is the thing to look at, is like, if depression is really a form of dissociation or a form of disconnection, right? What is it that I might be disconnected from? What is it that, if I was more connected to, might really radically reframe my experience of life and change how everything feels and occurs to me, right? And I get it. When we are in this place of dissociation, sometimes we cognitively can't come up with those answers. They just seem far away, far out. I can't think about that. I don't know is the standard answer I get, right? But I would encourage you to push yourself to think about it, unpack what is the disconnect here, and what could the healing connection be or look like, or what, and maybe it's not something about the past or something, missing right now, but maybe it's about a way to steer forward into the future that might be more connective for you. So I just want to kind of put this idea out there. Try this out. Try out throwing out the term depression to describe what you're experiencing. Trying to describe, what it is that you're experiencing that you would call depression. Try to unpack, and try on this concept. Just try it on as, again, a thought experiment of, I don't have depression, I have disconnect. I have dissociation. And look at where that disconnect might be in your life. And when that disconnect started, what was happening in your life when this sense of disconnect kicked in, right? What was occurring? And, again, this is the kind of thing where sometimes we don't have the the memories, or we don't have the kind of therapeutic language or therapeutic understandings of what to look for, and this might be the kind of thing you want to work with a therapist or a hypnotherapist like myself to start to get more in touch with what that might be. But I want you to start to think about it in this way, or try this on at very least, because again, a lot of people come to me and they're like, wow, that's so useful, that's so helpful, this was a blind spot, now I get it, I see, etc., etc. So hopefully this will be useful for you too. So that's my message too for the day. Much love to you all. I hope you're doing well out there. If you are dealing with depression, my heart goes out to you. I get it, I've been there, it's really rough. So thanks for watching. More content on the way soon.